Welcome to the Strategic Treasurer Podcast, your source for interesting Treasury news in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in.
Over the past decade, Strategic Treasurer has developed a highly successful, industry-wide Treasury research program. Today, more than a dozen surveys are offered annually to poll the industry on an array of topics including fraud, B2B payments, compliance, risk management, and technology. But what goes on behind the scenes? What is the ultimate goal of this research? And, more importantly, how is it being leveraged to drive greater understanding and awareness within the industry? On this episode of the podcast, Strategic Treasurers Craig Jeffery and Isaac Zaubi discuss how their Treasury research program is being used to drive market research forward and how it can add value to you and your company.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Treasury Update Podcast. I'm Isaac Zaubi and I'm joined by Craig Jeffery, Managing Partner here at Strategic Treasurer. Craig, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me again.
So today's discussion will be a bit different from past episodes in that we'll be discussing the topic at hand, market research, but from the standpoint of sort of how our own market intelligence division has been created and fostered over time. I know that market research and data in general, has increasingly been used and is being used throughout the financial industry to drive both daily decision making as well as strategic operations over the course of several years. So I thought it would be interesting for our audience to hear firsthand what went into developing our own division of market research and how it has helped us further our knowledge and understanding of the industry.
The division, as you refer to, the informed part of Strategic Treasurer, provides information for the entire industry at large. So that's a purpose of it versus our advisory, which is geared towards particular and specific clients. So this is a broad set of knowledge sharing and information, whether it's a webinar, a podcast, a market survey, information. So you said, how do we begin developing that? I think the key area is we are, as a consulting firm, we're out talking to people all the time, working with different companies. Bankers do the same thing. They see a lot of other companies. And what's one of the top questions that people ask is, what are others doing? What's a leading practice? What's a best practice? And how do you know that? And so the fact that you have multiple data points helps with the advisory piece, but it's limited. Even though I might talk to, be on projects for 20 different companies over the course of the year involved in different projects, that's not hundreds. And so it is limited, and so it can be more anecdotal. And I think part of it is a thirst for knowledge to see what's going on in areas that might not be completely obvious, or you can deduce those, but needing to get that data. So when we talk about fact-based and logic-based decisions, we have that. It's not purely anecdotes. Anecdotes are helpful. Logical decisions make sense, but it's nice when you can support different elements of a project or understand what others are doing from a macro view of the market at large.
Absolutely. So I know that the first survey Strategic Treasurer offered was back in 2009. Can you talk a little bit about what went into developing that first survey, some of the key obstacles or challenges you faced as that was built out?
The first time we did a formal survey, we had to have a survey tool to capture information. The goal is designed to make sure we can do that over time. And when I say over time, run this in multiple years, because it's great to get a snapshot of where things are. But there's a number of activities in Treasury and finance and risk and compliance that you can see a shift. Something becomes more important, more people are doing this, or their organization changes, or what they do for counterparty exposure shifts. So we want to make sure we had tools that could capture that. So we had to make sure we got a tool in place. We partnered with a firm. Actually, our first two surveys, we had long-term partners who we worked with to get the data out. And part of that was to make sure we had a broad enough audience. In the beginning, we were a new firm. We'd been out for a while, and not everyone knew us. And so it was helpful to leverage partners to help get a much larger audience.
Sure. So over time, as these surveys were developed, obviously we've added to the number of surveys offered year over year since 2009. What do you think, in your opinion, sort of the biggest sort of advantage was to the methods by which we were able to build these programs out? Is there one thing you can point to that say that was the key to developing this, or that was the most important aspect of it?
I'm not sure I can point to one thing. A couple items that come to mind about success is, one, participants, that people are willing to spend the time to put their information forward and get data. So that's been great, and we are very appreciative of all the corporate treasury practitioners, the people in different industries that wouldn't be considered corporations, banks. That's number one. And part of that, I think, one of the things that's helped us the most is our permission database continues to grow, and the trust we have with the industry at large has really made the process easier. And I think when people see good data, they're more apt to take a long survey. And our surveys are so long, other people do surveys, so you can't have a survey that has that many questions. And we say, yes, you can. They say, no, you can't. We go back and forth a little bit. But people will take a survey if it's long, if you give them much more data and more insights that matter to their job. Now, it's easy to get 500 people on a webinar going over survey results. That's very easy to do. It's a much different thing to get 500 people to spend 20, 25, or 30 minutes. And you have to make sure you give them good data, the follow-up questions and answers to the initial one. And you can't do that if you don't have a good demographic structure so that you can slice the data different ways. And if you don't provide the type of analysis that's extraordinarily useful. The other piece, you asked for one, I'm going to keep rambling on different ones, but the other piece is this longitudinal aspect of we've asked some of these questions for 10 years. And we can see changes in the industry over a long period of time because some changes are minor. And just taking a single snapshot, of a race, for example, you have no idea what's going on. It's like that's where they are at the moment. And that's useful. There's lots of color in any given year. But when you start to factor in some of these over time, you can see people's, high view, for example, of how well they manage bank accounts and control it. And then you have regulations like FBAR coming in and they have to get more involved. And then they start saying their self-rating of how well they manage bank accounts plummets because it was tested. And you can see what goes on when there's unlimited coverage of FDIC for deposits in the U.S. to that coming off. And you can see how that changes. And what surprises us about some of those things are insurance comes off, it's down to $250,000. You would expect people to move very rapidly away from it. There is a movement, but it usually takes multiple years. So it's interesting to see how things change. Is it influenced by overall risk, regulation, insurance, coverage, emphasis in the media, more discussion topics. So it's really interesting to see these changes over time and then bring insight into how different elements are impacting those numbers.
Sure. So you were mentioning how this data goes into sort of fostering our own understanding of the industry, especially when looking at long-term trends and preferences of corporate treasurers and banks. But with regards to how the data is put to work overall, both to further our own knowledge and the industry at large, sort of what are the mechanisms or channels that you've put in place to foster that, to get the word out, to spread the knowledge?
Yeah, so every time we do a survey, we provide a survey results webinar. That's open to everybody, and lots of our competitors go, bankers go, a tremendous number of corporations go attend and look at those. What we started some time ago was you have to take the survey to get a more complete report of information. If you can get the same information, not commit 20 minutes or 30 minutes, people will do that. They're smart. They want the answers. They want to do it. So we're trying to incent them. And, the other thing that's an interesting learning event is when people go through and answer all the questions, based on how we've researched a particular topic and we step through it logically, it starts to fill in people's minds, too, about what they may or may not be doing. And so it not only provides an opportunity for reflection, but analysis on what maybe others are doing or should be doing even before they get results. And I think that proves to be invaluable. And I think that's part of the reason why people will come and spend a lot of time on these surveys. And those are helpful.
Sure. So looking at the current state of our market research, I know, as we've said earlier, it started in 2009. We've been expanded rapidly. Can you provide us with some current metrics just to show that snapshot of where we are today?
Sure, and I think you passed the note to me about what those metrics were, but I know we have 10 or more annual surveys, so we run these each year. on a variety of topics. We have over 600 questions across these 10 surveys. Now, we always ask demographic questions, size of company, how many countries are you in, what's your role, title, different elements of complexity. And that allows us to cut data different ways to see, is there a difference between Asia Pac, Europe, North America, large to small companies. And as the population is large, it allows us to make meaningful assertions and meaningful cuts of data to see what may be changing, adoption of technology, replacement, type of platform used, you name it. That's an element. But 600 questions so far, and we have well over 2,000 respondents someone may take one survey, they may take almost all of them. So those are some of the key demographics. And then the other point, what are some of the topics we have? You can find them on our website. Search for content and surveys, and you'll find them. But some of them are cash forecasting, technology, liquidity risk management, and that includes both the investment side of the house as well as borrowing and making sure you're diversified there, supply chain finance, treasury fraud and controls, compliance, and we have a number of rapid research surveys that we throw in from time to time. There's others as well, but it covers the vast majority of the treasury space in areas that aren't covered already. There's certain surveys that are out there, but every time we've added a survey, it's either completely new in the space that nobody else was doing anything about it, or it covers different areas of that particular topic. We're not trying to do a complete copycat of another survey. We want to do something that's new that helps increase the understanding of the industry, the treasury industry.
And those reports and survey resources are free, so anybody that would be interested in checking those out, feel free to go over to the website, download them. I'd be happy to have you look at them. Moving forward now, looking at Strategic Treasurer's future goals, sort of long-term objectives in this space. Can you provide us with any insight as to some ongoing initiatives or some soon-to-be-released initiatives that you plan to provide to the industry?
That follows up nicely on their question, so this sort of addresses that one and this topic. So we've captured this information. What do we do with it? I'll say a couple things we don't do, and part of the trust is when you take a survey, that is not an opportunity for us to market, to say, oh, how did you answer? Let's go and call about the needs. Now, there are a couple surveys, we'll put a question, are you interested in talking to us about such and such, where someone can indicate, let's have a call, and maybe we do a project. But we never use that information to market, not directly, not indirectly, on a survey. That information is, we don't review it in that way, we don't use it in that way, and that's crucial because it has to stay anonymous, and very few people in an organization can access that. The underwriting firms never see the underlying data, so we maintain that, keep that secure and safe. I think that's important to know. I think that's very important to know because that is a standard for surveys not to do that. You asked me before about how do we use this data, how do we make it available. So I had shared a survey results report. We create infographics. We do a webinar. We also take that data and use it for additional analysis that we're doing about the market size. We use that on different projects in terms of dissecting and seeing what goes on so that when we're consulting with someone, we say, here is what a leading practice is, and here's why it's a leading practice. We also buttress that with data. This is the percentage of people that are doing that. Here's how it's changed over time. Here's why, and if there's an interesting or an important carve-out that we need to do based on complexity of the organization by countries or how many currencies they operate in or banking structure, we can pull that out so that our advice is not just directionally correct, but it can be calibrated based upon peers of complexity. And I think that's a key element. So we do that for regular projects, but there's also a number of firms that see the value of benchmarking their practices, benchmarking their performance, benchmarking their efficiency. So it could be across any of those domains that we talked about. What are you doing from a control standpoint, from a compliance standpoint with bank accounts, for example? Could be with liquidity risk, updating your policies. How accurate is your cash forecast? What are your plans for investing in technology vis-a-vis others? How that's changing over time? Others also want to know, market sizing issues and plans to spend and other pieces. And so we use this vast repository of information to help us in that. And at first it was just data points, but now that we have trends and changes over time, that analysis is invaluable to all our customers, whether they're a private equity firm, a bank, a technology firm, a corporate, a treasury group, a higher ed or healthcare. We have all that information and can leverage that in a way that's useful to them for their particular decision points and useful to us to make sure we can give that type of granular calibration for what you should do, why.
Sure. No, and that makes total sense. Thank you for providing that insight. And that does answer the first portion of my question. But now looking forward, looking ahead, obviously, over the next 3 to 5 years, let's say, do you have any ongoing research initiatives or any survey programs upcoming that you'd like to share or like to provide some additional commentary on?
Yeah, well, I had a publications manager who had said we should have a Treasury ambassadors program, and that would be a group of people who are eagerly plugged in. There's benefits to being plugged in that they take all or most of the surveys and a program like that. And I'll be honest, his name was Isaac, and I was thinking, that's crazy, nobody's going to do that. But we'll humor the millennial, and that's a pretty big program. Why don't you tell us how it's gone? And I will say I was wrong. You were right, more right
you
than
heard it
you
here
thought
first.
you were
Craig
going
was
to.
wrong.
It's been far more successful than I thought. I remember we put a question. I mean, especially we put on a question on one of the surveys, and all of a sudden there's dozens and dozens of people who are like, yes, I want to do this, because not just because they want to help inform the industry at large, but there's part of that, but there's a lot more knowledge that they gain. There's some additional information. And that was actually quite encouraging, and I was happy to be wrong on that point.
But sure, just to provide some additional commentary there and a little bit of background. So as we had expanded the scope of our market research at this point, offering 10 plus surveys annually, we did just want to make sure that we were capturing the correct amount of information from those that matter most in the correct organizational sizes, the correct roles, treasurers, assistant treasurers, cash managers, and so forth. And so we opened up this Treasury Ambassadors program to people that were already taking our surveys, but also to any practitioner interested in participating in our market research to the extent that they'll participate in our surveys. Approximately, let's say, 2 hours of commitment per year worth of survey taking. In response to that, we provide them with extended survey metrics, and extended survey results, virtually all the data that's captured through the surveys. Offer private webinar sessions that go over some of the data not generally released to the public, and then also provide them with an opportunity to win gift cards or some other prizes on the surveys that they participate in. And we were offering that information just as a way of saying thank you to the practitioners that make our market research so valuable. Obviously, we couldn't do it without the very active and engaged audience and network that we have. And just as a means of fostering that moving forward, we thought that this would be an appropriate way of giving back.
So, Isaac, how has the success been? That's the point that I said I was wrong about. How would you describe the uptake in the program? It's not even been out for half a year yet.
Sure, and we had just started offering it in July, and the response has been, much greater than anticipated. We've had scores of respondents reach out to us, express interest in participating, and we're looking to add much more in the years to come. So this has been a very successful program for us to offer, and we look forward to servicing it future down the road. But thank you, Craig, for joining us. That pretty much sums up everything that I wanted to touch on today. I would encourage anybody listening to go on our website and just download any of the survey resources that you think you'd be interested in. They are all, of course, free. And then, of course, if you see any information or any data that further piques your interest and you'd like to learn more about that, feel free to reach out, give us an email. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Treasury Update podcast. Be sure to follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Just search for Strategic Treasurer. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.